After all the madness of this year's offseason, we finally heard from Scottie Barnes and his opinion on lots of stuff that has happened over the course of this summer. So we'll discuss that, including Jakob Poeltl validating some of the reports that it was a real possibility he was going back to the San Antonio Spurs. So we'll discuss what he had to say in his official press conference now as a long-term Toronto Raptor. And apparently MLSE is not paying their taxes. So we'll discuss all that in this video. And folks, we're pumping out a lot of content left, right, and center for the Raptors Digest, covering all of the latest news. So if you guys want to stay up to date with everything regarding the Toronto Raptors, definitely hit that subscribe button. It would mean the world to me. But let's dive into the news. And the first thing we're taking a look at is Scottie Barnes speaking on off-season news, reports, everything that's gone on regarding this team. As you know, Scottie Barnes is sort of getting handed the reins. Darko Rajakovic, new Raptors head coach, is talking about how talented Scottie Barnes is and how the plan is to sort of lead the team into his hands, let him be the star for this Toronto Raptors squad in the future, which I found interesting in its own right. But Scottie Barnes also came out and had some interesting quotes regarding this year's offseason. So firstly, especially with Fred VanVleet gone, Scottie had this to say: "We all know that we can win at the level we can get to. And we all know what it takes to get there. We just have to get back to winning. That's our main attitude, and we have the pieces to do it." So this is encouraging coming from Scottie Barnes, who we know, given his personality, his outspoken sort of demeanor, right? He's energetic. He's a leader on the court in terms of always talking, always chatting, getting things going. And the fact that he's going into the season with the approach, hey, we need to win. We need to win now, especially with Fred VanVleet now gone at this point. Be nice to see Scottie Barnes as he develops into hopefully a potential star. We're not sure he'll be able to take his game to the next level to, because we do have a new coach. He didn't progress that greatly during his second season, but I still have high hopes for Scottie Barnes, and especially with Fred VanVleet gone now, we need someone to step up and be that vocal leader. Now, a lot of people weren't that happy with Fred VanVleet, especially with the sort of divide that happened between the young players and the older players in the locker room. We covered that in a video we put out yesterday, but Scottie Barnes stepping in, especially with Fred VanVleet gone now, the face of the youth movement for the Toronto Raptors, the fact he's locked in on winning, it's exciting to see. He also had this to say about head coach Darko Rajakovic, that he just has a different philosophy about basketball, of how it should be played. Throughout the ball movement, high pick and rolls, playing the right way, and making the right passes, making the right plays. So it's interesting how that's worded, how that's described there by Scottie Barnes, saying, you know, how it should be played throughout how it's a different philosophy of basketball that Nick Nurse wasn't really about, you know, moving the ball a lot, which was a big thing. I always find this interesting when people bring up Nick Nurse's sort of evolution as a coach of the Toronto Raptors, because in every single post-game presser, he'd always discuss, we need to get the ball swinging a little bit, you know, moving around the court. That was a huge quote from Nurse pretty well in every single post-game. And when he was hired by this team, it was the innovative offensive schemes that Nurse would be able to bring to the table, which definitely were there. We had some amazing inbounds plays, some amazing schemes, especially come playoff time with Nick Nurse, that were really effective, but we did usually revert to ISO ball coming down the stretch of games, especially, which a lot of teams do, is there's usually a need for not turning over the ball. If you turn over the ball in a late game situation, they come back and score quickly. That can be the end of your game. So a lot of teams like to play conservative isolation style basketball at the very close, but Nurse, I guess it was more so the entire fourth quarter. I digress on that. But, you know, it's interesting because that's what Nurse was hyped about. And then his offense slowly devolved into Siakam and Fred VanVleet isolations. And now we're hearing similar things that we heard about Nick Nurse when he was hired initially, you know, about Darko Rajakovic. So I'm happy with all of the nice comments coming from guys like Scottie Barnes, even McDaniels, who was just, had his introductory press conference, talked about how Darko's going to be coming in with a new free-flowing offense he's excited to be a part of, right? I'm excited for all the things being said about Darko and the fact that Scottie Barnes is bought in with a new philosophy of basketball. It's game-changing, you know, comparing to what they did last season, but I want to see it out there on the court first. That's what will get me most hyped. But let's dive into the next topic of news. It's basically Jakob Poeltl reveals that the Spurs were a real landing spot, not a landing spore. My bot doesn't have spell check. That's why I spell everything wrong there. But basically, Jakob Poeltl had his introductory press conference, was asked a lot of interesting questions, gave out a lot of good quotes. The big one, the juicy one that was asked, was whether or not how appealing was it potentially go back to the San Antonio Spurs. And he talked about how His time in San Antonio, he loved it. The team really loved him as a player. Even when he was traded and all those types of things, it wasn't like they weren't happy with his production, his performance, and him going back there was a real possibility. However, when he gauged everything, and one thing he continuously brought up in his press conference after being signed for the Toronto Raptors is that he continuously say, I think Toronto is definitely the best place for me for the next couple seasons. Kept saying the next couple years, the next 2 years. The next 2 years, I'm really big on what this Toronto Raptors team being involved in the squad and all these types of things. And I found that really interesting because he signed a 4-year deal. He signed a 4-year contract, but he kept saying, I don't know if it was just, he's used to saying a couple words. Obviously, everyone has their words they rely on when they're doing YouTube videos or doing press conferences or any of those types of things, but kept using the wording of next 2 seasons. So maybe he'll reevaluate, re-engage, demand a trade in 2 years. Who really knows? Definitely reading the tea leaves a little bit too much on that front. But basically, Jakob Poeltl talked about how he did look at the San Antonio Spurs as a real possibility, but the Raptors were the destination that made the most sense for him. Money-wise, he was comfortable with the city. He knows his role here with the Toronto Raptors, because with the Spurs, Victor Wembanyama, yes, they want him to play the 4. That's what the reports are saying now. He's, 7'3", 7'4", 7'5"? Closing games. Probably going to be playing Wembanyama at the 5. So, Poeltl probably saw that writing on the wall and said, okay, I don't have a great opportunity to close games down here. So, saw the Toronto Raptors, said, I'll stay back with this group. I'm happy with things. And said even though that Fred VanVleet left, he would have been happy if Fred VanVleet were to stay. He's still confident that the squad is able to get it done. They still have a lot of veterans on the team, a lot of young guys still developing over the course of this year. I don't know. It's happy to see Big Yak back. Really interesting presser if you want to check it out. We dove into that in this vid. But the final thing we're discussing in this video, I found this pretty funny. The Raptors owners not paying taxes. I'm throwing it in here at the end. I just found it pretty jokes. Basically, news came out from CBC Toronto that the Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, so MLSE, the owner of the Toronto Maple Leafs and Toronto Raptors, have been named as one of Toronto's largest property tax debtors. So with an unpaid bill of roughly $1.18 million, dating back to the 2019 tax year. So since the Raptors won the chip, MLSE has just said, hey, we're not paying no more taxes. We gave back to the city. Trudeau, whoever the heck runs property taxes, I'm not sure if it's provincial governments, city governments, or federal. They're saying, no. Even though we make millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, MLSE's bell all these... $1 million is like a $5 bill in the pockets of these large organizations, and they're still not paying their taxes. Getting put on those lists, I found that kind of jokes. So, I don't know, maybe it's the Raptors ownership being cheap, why we never go into the luxury tax, but it is what it is. Found it pretty funny. Anyways, we got a lot of stuff coming out regarding the Toronto Raptors, so definitely hit that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with everything regarding this team. It mean the world to me. Anyways, you guys are the best. I'm signing out. Cheers.